Christi here with Little Salty Homesteader. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I'm actually going to be talking about some tips for how you can start your own vegetable garden. I have had a few people message me lately, and I love getting these messages asking for tips and advice on how they can go ahead and get started growing their own food now, which method is best in terms of container or raised bed or in-ground, what have you. So I thought that I would just turn on the camera and make a video for you guys, sort of detailing just a very condensed, how-to on starting a vegetable garden. So I did write some notes down, so if you see me looking down, it's just to refer to that so that I don't forget to mention some pretty important things. Let's go ahead and get started. So there are three key components that you need in order to successfully grow any sort of vegetable garden, whether that's in the summer or the fall, spring, what have you. You are always going to need sunlight, soil, and water. Now, for soil, let's keep in mind that I am talking strictly about those outdoor in soil gardens. I understand there's many other methods that don't require soil, like hydroponics. I am not speaking on those today. This is very beginner level in the soil gardening. So sunlight, soil, and water. For sunlight, most vegetables require 6 to 8 hours of said sunlight in order to grow. In the heat of summer, especially here in North Texas, the morning sun is going to be much less harsh than that late afternoon sun. So whenever you're thinking about your vegetable garden, map the sun at different times of the day in your entire growing area. So you're gonna wanna go out and you're gonna wanna take pictures in the morning, around noonish, and then late afternoon, different parts of your garden. Now, keep in mind that as we advance into the summer, the position of the sun is actually going to change. In my yard, what that means for me is the shady area along the fence line separating me to my other next door neighbor, it actually will be much less. And then there's a spot like in the back corner where we took the tool shed down, that is going to get less shade as well, which will enable me to grow more food in that specific spot. Most of my garden is actually situated where it will get afternoon shade, with the exception of those raised beds along that fence and one of my green stalks. How I kind of get around not having much afternoon shade for those two is I actually grow okra in them. The okra loves the heat, so it grows very quickly once it starts getting hot, and then it provides the shade for all the other vegetables and herbs and flowers that I will have growing in that bed and that one. Sorry for the dog butt. The next thing that you're going to want to consider is actually water. All vegetables in your garden will require water, so whenever you're planning your garden, consider where your water spigot is and how you are going to actually be watering your garden. I water my entire garden with a water hose that has a nozzle on the end to control the flow, the stream, the speed, the pressure, all of that stuff coming out of the water hose. There are a lot of people that do the same thing. They just water by hand with their hose. There are people who are far more advanced in terms of watering, and they have set up irrigation or drip lines, drip tape, those type of things. That is also something that you can consider as well. It's something that I need to upgrade to as my garden continues to grow. If you do not have an outdoor spigot, you will probably be lugging that water from inside to outside. So kind of keep that in mind as you're planning out your garden. Are you gonna have to lug all that water? And if so, maybe plan your garden to be as close to that back door or patio door, whatever door you may have, to make that as easy as possible. Once you have picked that prime location based on the sunlight and the water, you can decide how you want to garden. Now, keep in mind that, like I said at the beginning of this video, this is strictly speaking on the in the soil methods. I speak anything that I'm touching on in this video pertains to in the soil gardening, right? Okay, so for your first garden, I do encourage you to start small. You can always add on as you fall in love with gardening, which I hope that you do, but you don't want to start so big right away that you end up overwhelmed and you don't take care of that space that you put so much work and thought into. So start small, add on later as you get more comfortable gardening or as you find your passion outside playing in the soil. So there are 3 common methods requiring soil. There's container gardening, like this fabric grow bag here that my sage is in. There is in ground gardening, like where I plant my flower bed. And then there's raised bed gardening, like where most of my vegetables are planted. All 3 have benefits and drawbacks, and it's going to mostly depend upon personal preference for you. Big B. If you are in an apartment or townhome, you might simply be relegated to containers or something like this green stalk behind me, which is essentially a giant tiered container. If you have mobility concerns or chronic pain, raised bed might be the best avenue for you. Or if you're simply just trying to get seeds in the ground very quickly and just get something up and going, then in-ground might be your best option. Like I said, it's all personal preference. There's benefits and drawbacks to each. As you continue your gardening journey, experiment if you're able to determine which one you like the best or which one of those works the best for you. Raised beds are my favorite. I will just go ahead and say that now. I'm slowly adding more raised beds, much to my husband's dismay. Regardless of which of the 3 methods you choose, you'll need loose, nutrient-rich soil. Nutrient-rich soil will be full of microorganisms and micronutrients that will help your plants grow strong and healthy. The main nutrients necessary for plant growth are nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Nitrogen will help the leaves and the stems grow, so anything that's green and above the soil line, that's going to be affected by nitrogen. Anything below the soil line, so those root systems, that's where the phosphorus comes in handy to help make those roots nice and strong. And then the flowers and the fruits themselves are benefited by potassium within the soil. Healthy soil will have enough of all 3 to help your plant grow, obviously. You can choose to purchase ready-to-use soil or amend what you have with organic matter like compost. Your soil should retain moisture while also be well draining. So what that means is if you pick up your soil and you kind of squeeze it to try to form a clump, it does not have a bunch of water dripping out of it like a sopping wet sponge. It will hold its shape, but then you can also crumble it easily. That means that it is holding on to some moisture, but it is also draining off what it does not require in order to stay moist. If you are gardening in an area that is heavy clay or heavy sand, you can amend both of those soil types with that organic matter like compost, like I mentioned. Once you have those, once you kind of know, if your soil is holding its shape, retaining moisture, all of those things, you can also do a soil test to see if it's needing any of those main 3 nutrients or any of the micronutrients. You can purchase different soil kits off of Amazon or at the hardware store, or you can get one through your county extension office, and the county extension office will actually do a much deeper dive into the soil and tell you, there's too much iron, or you might want to consider this micronutrient, something like that. So if you're just starting out, maybe look into one of those soil tests so you can hit the ground running with the perfect soil for you. Once you have those 3 key components, you can then decide what you want to grow. Now, the season that you decide to start your garden in is going to determine which crops grow best. Things like broccoli, cauliflower, lettuce, radishes, and beets all typically do better in cooler weather, and then vegetables like tomatoes, peppers, okra, eggplant, cucumbers, and squash typically do a whole lot better in your spring and summer gardens. When you're first starting out, grow what your family will eat. If no one in your house eats tomatoes, do not devote space within your garden for tomato plants. On the flip side of that, save some room for herbs like basil and dill, and then flowers like marigolds, because they make fantastic companion plants, meaning they provide benefits to those vegetables that you're trying so hard to grow. Basil and marigolds will help repel pests. Marigolds will encourage pollinators, and then dill will help draw in some beneficial predator bugs to help wipe out some of those not so good ones. Once you know what you'll be growing, you'll need to figure out if you need to get started plants or if you'll need to get seeds. So plants like tomatoes, peppers, and eggplants They benefit quite a lot from a bit of a head start, so a started plant is probably your best bet for those. However, plants like squash, okra, and cucumbers, they all grow pretty quickly, so they don't require you to start ahead. You can just simply put that seed in the ground and water it and get growing. Some plants like cucumbers, pole beans, and melons will benefit quite a lot from trellising because they are vining plants. Whenever you provide the trellis, you're giving them a structure for the plants to climb up, and then you end up with a lot less damaged fruit because it won't be climbing across your garden space. You can incorporate a vertical structure by using a cattle panel to create an arch. I have seen people use the gates from like their chain link fence to create a structure. There's wooden structures. You can really get creative here in order to give your plants that vertical space. Plants like tomatoes will benefit from some sort of trellis or staking structure because they grow very, very big and they get very, very heavy. So you can trellis them, you can stake them individually, or you can do what is known as a Florida weave in order to give those tomato plants a little bit of structure to help support them as they grow. Now, pepper plants, while they don't get as big as tomato plants, they can get quite heavy once they're loaded down with fruit. So you can use a structure like a tomato cage to provide them some support so that they don't bend and break, fall over into the soil. Once you have your garden planted, you're going to want to think about mulch. So mulch is an important component that is going to help retain moisture, insulate the roots, prevent erosion, slow down weed growth. It has a ton of benefits, and there's a lot of different types of mulch that you can use. You can use your dead leaves that have fallen off of your trees. You can use compost if you don't have access to anything else. You can use wood mulch, or my favorite is straw mulch. All of these will eventually break down and contribute to your overall soil health, which is fantastic. But they all provide all of those benefits that I mentioned. The biggest benefit actually is that once you mulch your plants, it will prevent splashback whenever you're watering back onto your vegetables, which will help slow down fungus and disease issues. Some things you'll need to watch out for in your garden are pests and diseases. Some pests include aphids, squash bugs, spider mites, squash vine borers, whiteflies, hornworms. You can slow down their pressure by companion planting. Remember, I mentioned the basil and the marigolds. You can companion plant with different herbs and vegetables that will benefit your garden. You can hand pick off the pests you see, and if it's something like aphids or spider mites, you can actually spray the plant with your water hose and it will move them along. Now, you may have to water those plants more than once to sort of discourage those pests, but it does work. You can also encourage predator insects to move in by planting dill, cilantro, and fennel. The shape of the flower heads, once those plants go to seed, encourage those beneficial predator insects to move in, create a habitat within your garden, and then they will help wipe out the bad bug issues. Some of the diseases that you may encounter are late and early blight, bacterial wilt, and powdery mildew. A lot of times a plant will become diseased whenever it is under a lot of stress. So some things that you can do to ensure that your plant doesn't become too horribly stressed out is ensure you have good, healthy soil. Make sure that you're watering adequately but not overwatering, and then lastly, hand pick off those pests and manage those pests as you need to. Once all the planting tasks are complete and you're managing those pests, you're going to have a lot of other routine maintenance stuff that you're going to need to do. So some of that includes pruning off any sort of dead or damaged leaves off of your plants. You're going to be pulling weeds, trellising and staking those wayward branches as they grow on your plants, and then fertilizing plants. So there is liquid fertilizer, like this fish emulsion here, which is going to give a quick boost of nutrients to your plants. And then there's slow release fertilizer like this, which is in granulated form, and it's a slow release fertilizer, which I just said. So both help feed the plant and encourage continued growth. You can get fertilizer blends for your overall vegetable garden like this one, or you can get blood meal for nitrogen and bone meal for phosphorus. There's different types of fertilizers depending on what you're planting. If you just have a flower garden, then you can get a fertilizer specific blend. This one I have had no issues with using across my tomatoes and all my vegetables. Just a quick note on these 3 numbers. This first one is going to be your nitrogen number, and this middle one is your phosphorus, and then this last one is your potassium. So this lets you know how much of each component. So this is 5% nitrogen, 7% phosphorus, and 3% potassium. And all 3 of those contribute to the overall health of each of the vegetables within your garden. Now, by the time you start a lot of these maintenance tasks, even though it is a ton of work, you'll actually start to begin to be able to harvest, which is great. That's the end goal, right? It makes all the hard work worth your efforts. If all of this seemed overwhelming, it's okay. I totally get it. I just threw a lot of information at you in a very relatively short amount of time. I encourage you to just go plant the seeds. You'll learn far more from the actual act of gardening than watching me or several other YouTube channels, reading 50 books, reading blog articles, however you're absorbing your information. Go out and physically plant the seed, because you're going to learn immensely more just by doing that. Go out, put your hands in the soil, get your garden manicures, and plant the seed. Thank you guys so much for watching today. That's all I have for you. If you have any other beginner how to start a vegetable gardening tips, please comment them below so that everybody can learn from each other. I do appreciate all of you for watching this video today. If you did like it, please feel free to subscribe, like, hit the notification bell, do all the YouTubey things, share the video, comment, all that stuff. It is helping me immensely. Until next time, go find a way to get those more garden manicures.